Hello and welcome to tonight's webinar, my first webinar for pokercoaching.com entitled A Deeper Dive into Position. This is a really exciting presentation, and I really want to thank you for coming out and joining me tonight. I'm really excited about doing this. Teaching is one of my favorite things in the world. And playing poker is probably my other favorite thing in the world. So when you put the two together, teaching people how to play better poker is pretty much the best thing in the world for me. Today, we're going to be talking about positions, which is one of the fundamentals, one of the foundations for profitable poker. And let's get into the action and let's get stacking. So first, why talk about position? Well, for those of you who know me through Jonathan Little's material, you know that I was one of the co-authors for Excelling at No Limit Holdem, and I wrote chapter 1 in that book. My chapter was entitled The 6 Ingredients for a Winning Poker Game, and that included a heavy emphasis on what I first popularized back in 2008 when I first started teaching on YouTube, the triple threat. Now, the triple threat consists of 3 components. The first one is position, which we are going to be diving deep into tonight. The second one is aggression, which we will be diving deep into April 30th. And the third component is selection, which we will be diving deep into May 28th. So if you're interested in learning everything you can about the triple threat and 3 of the key ingredients for a winning poker game, save the dates, write those down for your calendar. Now, my approach to poker is about getting every advantage you can. And the triple threat accounts for 3 of those 5 advantages. So for the information advantage, that is achieved through the use of position. The skill and betting advantage is achieved through the use of aggression, and the card and hand range advantage is achieved through the use of selection. Psychological advantage is a whole thing on the metagame, and the stamina game or physical or mental advantage, depending on what you want to call it, is its own thing too. Tonight, we're going to focus on position, how we can get the information advantage, and this is going to be one of the core principles that we're going to combine with the other pillars to just make an extremely powerful poker game. So let's get into it. pokercoaching.com. I'm joining the team. I'm joining Team Poker Coaching. It's been a long time in the making, and I'm really excited about this. Honestly, when Jonathan reached out about excelling at No Limit Holdem in the first place, I was kind of flattered, and I was pretty just like honored for the opportunity, and I just jumped on it. And then a couple of years later, I saw he was building up pokercoaching.com. The site looked really good. My friends were telling me great things about it. And when he reached out to me about this, I was like, wow, the universe has just gifted me something I've really always wanted, which was to be part of a training team, to not really just be teaching on my own, but to be part of a bigger team. Jonathan is an absolute genius, a great poker mind, and a great business mind. And I just love working with him. He's such a pleasure to work with, very professional. He's very available. He helps in technical difficulties like this. And it's a real honor. And anyone who's been following Grips between 2014 and now knows how much I love Alex Fitzgerald, one of my main tournament mentors who's helped me get a lot of results. And Matt Affleck is an awesome dude too. We've played in the World Series together. And I can honestly say that his chapter and Alex's in Excelling at No Limit Holdem were the ones that I learned the most from. So as a coach at pokercoaching.com, wow, it feels pretty cool saying that. I will be doing webinars like this one, and I will also be doing hand quizzes as well with an emphasis on cash games. I spent the first 7 years of my career playing cash games, both online and live. It is my bread and butter. And despite the fact that I've put a ton of effort into tournaments, studying them, playing them, and getting results in them, cash is still my bread and butter. So that's what I'm going to be primarily bringing to pokercoaching.com is overarching theory that applies to all forms of poker and a lot of cash game hand reviews. So like I said before, it's really an honor to be working alongside these guys and something I'm really grateful for. So big thank you to Jonathan, if you're listening, for inviting me on board. So, position. Let's really get into the material now, because that's what you all came here for. In my opinion, position is to poker what location is to real estate. And if you're watching and you know a thing about real estate, or you've heard anything about real estate, when the question is, what are the three keys to success in real estate? They are location, location, location. So in poker, if you want to have success and you want that major key to success, think position, position, position. If you want to take a sports metaphor, for example, instead of a real estate example, playing in position is like having an extra man on the court. It's like playing 5-on-4 in basketball, or 5-on-4 in hockey, or 12-on-11 in football, or 11-on-10, depending on which country you're playing football in. Or, if you're playing international soccer, 12-on-11. Playing out of position, on the other hand, is like being on the penalty kill, or having one of your players gotten a red card, or in the case of baseball, having 2 outfielders there instead of 3. It's not a guaranteed recipe for failure, but it makes for a much harder time to win the game and to protect yourself. If strategy games are more your thing and you prefer, a war example, playing in position is like having the higher terrain in a battle. Whereas playing out of position is like fighting an uphill battle, where you may win while fighting an uphill battle, but you're going to need to have great weapons, which is, your cards, and you're going to need great strategic execution, which is your betting, to overcome your disadvantage of having, the lower terrain, or, in the case of poker, the worse position. So, when you have that better terrain, you can just see so much more. Or, in the sports example, having the extra player is like an extra set of eyes in the game, which is what position is all about. It's something that gives you access to more information. You can see more of what's going on. You have more information. And in a game of imperfect information, knowledge is power. And it's free information. A third thing about position that you definitely want to know is that position gives you extra control over the pot size. We will dive deeper into this as we get into the following slides. This is our introduction, just so you can know what kind of terrain we're going to be covering tonight. The fourth thing you need to know about position is that the power of position is amplified by stack depth. The deeper the stacks are, the more beneficial, the more powerful, the greater the advantages of having position are. The lower the stack depths, the less important position becomes. Number 5 is that positional awareness is essential to win at poker. It's one of the first things that I encourage my students to look for at the table when paying attention to opponents' opening ranges is, are they positionally aware? Do they open different hands from under the gun than they do from on the button, or do they play the same hands from all positions? And if they aren't positionally aware, it's probably a less skilled player and someone worth going after. Whereas when someone does adjust their ranges from position to position to position and plays fewer hands early position and more hands late position, that person is positionally aware, which means they are more aware of one of the key components of poker strategy, probably aware of more, and therefore a dangerous player. And the sixth thing that you need to know about position is, when done correctly, when paying attention to the right things, you can play in position more often than others, and you can have a huge advantage over the competition in every pot that you enter. I remember watching the World Poker Tour back in the day with Mike Sexton and Vince Van Patten, and I remember Mike saying that the goal in poker is to make correct decisions. And when we're in position, we're more able to make more correct decisions because we have more information. The more information we have, the more able we are to make correct decisions. So this is a picture from him at the final table of WPT Montreal, where he won his first World Poker Tour, probably largely thanks to the power of position. So how does position help us make correct decisions? Before we go through the bullet points, let me ask you a question. If you were a detective solving a mystery and you had a choice between getting one clue to help you solve the mystery or two clues, what would you pick? Let me know in the chat. Just type in number 1 or number 2. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, LOL, 2, 2, haha, 2, 2, 2, obviously 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay, so we're in an agreement that we would rather have 2 pieces of information than 1 piece of information when trying to solve a mystery. Now, okay, what if instead of the option of 1 or 2, you had the choice between 3 clues or 4 clues? Which would you pick? Let me know in the chat. Number 3 or number 4. 4 clues for sure. How about 4? 4, 4, 4, 4, connect 4, everybody 4, thumbs up 4, let's go 4. Okay, so clearly more clues is better than less clues when we're trying to solve a mystery. And another way to look at poker is that you're a detective trying to put the mystery together to solve the puzzle and figure out what's really going on. So this is what position gives you. This is what position gives you, is that when you are in a position, your opponents act first, thereby giving you information, and you get to act second. You get to act later, thereby getting more information. It's very simple, it's very basic, but it's so easy to forget about just how important this is. And the deeper we get into this, I'm going to show you how it grows. So the first key concept is we want to have position because we want to go last so we can have more information to be able to make better decisions in this game of imperfect information. We also get to the right to act last on every street. This is when we have absolute position because we can have other players ahead of us. Getting to act last means you get info on every opponent in the hand. So the guy who has the worst position will give information to the players who have better and best position, but you, as the player who has the best absolute position, will get information on player 1, on player 2, on every player who has to act before you, but they don't get that information on you. So we're starting to create an unfair information advantage. We're starting to create an imbalanced setup where we are the favorite, and the better our position, the better the info. This is something that my good friend and mentor, Calvin Anderson, taught me, is that the biggest flaw that most players have, especially when they try to loosen up their game and play more hands and play more aggressively and put more pressure on their opponents, is that they play too loose early position and too tight in late position. What I mean by this is when they want to loosen up, what most players do is they just start to play more hands from all positions. Now, they still do it in a scale, in a range. They don't play 50% of hands from every position, but they kind of widen up equally in all the positions. And this is a mistake. We're going to look even more into this with some charts later in the presentation to illustrate the point more. But the problem is when we equally expand our range from all positions, it ignores the laws of position. We want to open our range slightly more from early position, but open it up a crazy amount in late position because we have that huge advantage of greater information on every street as the hand progresses. And in terms of making correct decisions, it's also important to know that there are 2 types of position. There is relative and absolute position, which we're going to dive into on the next slide. So just because you don't have the button, which is where absolute position lives, doesn't mean that you can't get an information edge on your opponent. You can get an information edge on some of your opponents. You just won't have as big of an edge as the person I mentioned who acts last on every street and who has absolute position. So this is a little table chart showing the positions to just make this understandable. And we have the early position, middle position, and late position, which is really useful for pre-flop, and then post-flop doesn't really matter. More on that as we progress. So the first position, the first type of position, which is the most valuable type of position, is absolute position. This is owned by the player on the button or by the player who is the last raiser. So if the button's planning on folding, then absolute position would belong to the cutoff. If the cutoff and button are both planning on folding, then absolute position would belong to middle position. If every single player is planning on folding, then whoever opens the pot first, and that's actually pretty important, you might want to write that down. Whoever opens first, if everyone else is planning on folding, is going to have absolute position in the hand. So if you actually know that the whole table is going to fold behind you, and we'll talk more later on how you can achieve this, you can open in early position and still have absolute position. The important thing is who is left to act behind you and how are they likely to react to your open. Something also I popularized way back when is coining the term of the money chip. I would really like you to think about the dealer chip as the money chip. The reason being because when you have that in front of you is when you are going to be making the most money. You always have absolute position when you have the button, provided that you play your hand. And next we have relative position, which is achieved by closing the action. So pre-flop, if there is a raise from under the gun one and middle position calls, the big blind has dibs on relative position. They have the opportunity to close the action. Something I realized while making this presentation, though, is we can pay for the right to gain relative position by limping in. Because if under the gun limps in and someone else raises, late positions react, the big blind has to react before under the gun acts. Also, we can straddle to pick up relative position. But it's something that we have to pay for, and it's not as valuable as absolute position. So in the absence of others, having relative position is good, but having absolute position is better, and having both is best. Now, as a reminder of how to get it, to get absolute position, play the button, and to get relative position, be the player closing the action. The ways to not get relative position would be to be the first caller of an open, because anyone else who overcalls behind you is going to have relative position on you after the flop. And how to not get absolute position is by playing hands from early position, especially if the players behind you are loose. Active players like to call raises, 3-bet, do things like that. Another way of understanding relative position is it's your position relative to the pre-flop aggressor. So if you have a pre-flop aggressor who you expect to continuation bet on many boards, by having relative position, you get to see what everyone else does after that action before you make your action. So yeah, the only way to lose absolute position is when you're on the button is to fold pre-flop, which is why there are many strategies that you can implement to get position more. Few examples are limping on the button when you have aggressive 3-betters in the blind so that you can call a raise and play the rest of the hand in position with a deep pot to stack ratio. Another example is raising to a smaller amount on the button with aggressive 3-betters. So when they 3-bet, you will be getting better odds on your call, but also you'll be dealing with a smaller pot pre-flop, therefore a higher stacked pot ratio, which gives a bigger amplification to the benefit of position, which we will show on a later slide. And the last one is when facing an open, let's say middle position or the cutoff opens and you're on the button, to 3-bet rather than flatting when there are habitual squeezers in the blinds. Reason being, let's say, for example, the big blind has a 3-bet percentage of 15 and a cold 4-bet percentage of 3%. Or, we'll go loose. We'll go 5%. If you flat, you're going to get 3-bet 15% of the time. Maybe you can't continue. Whereas if you 3-bet, you're only going to get cold 4-bet 5% of the time. That means, looking at 15 versus 5%, you're able to continue. You're able to have absolute position 67% more often if you 3-bet rather than flat. With habitual squeezers in a position where you don't have a hand that can call a 3-bet. And that's why a lot of hands are best played as 3-bets rather than flat calls, especially when you have position and the opportunity to have absolute position throughout the hand. You want to protect that, and the easiest way to do that is to knock out the players behind you who may want to try to take position from you. So the key thing to take away from this slide, if you're taking notes, you want to write something down, is that you want to play the widest range of hands on the button because that is the position from where you have the highest expected profit. If you look through your database, if you look through your hands, you will almost certainly see that you make the most money when you are on the button, followed by the cutoff, followed by the other positions, and the least amount in the blinds. And it just goes to show that position is king in this game.